Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's main topic is sustainable development, ESG regulations, and reporting frameworks in organizational practice. Before we dive in, let me briefly introduce you our lecturer, Tina Turk. Tina Turk is a sustainability manager and management systems manager at Telemach Slovenia. She is responsible for managing and ensuring compliance with the quality management system, environmental management system, and energy management system. If you have any questions for Tina during the presentations, please type them in the chat or wait until the end of the session to ask her directly. We would also really appreciate if you could turn your cameras on. Tina, the floor is yours.
Mor to je, aha, mikrofon ti pobira. Tako ti tudi na.
So, thank you, Jana. You see my presentation?
Yes. And
Okay, great.
others? I think it works. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So, welcome everybody to today's lecture on sustainable development, ESG regulations and reporting frameworks. Today we will focus in detail on the following key topics, which are fundamental pillars for understanding and implementing sustainable development in business world. So, first, we will explore what exactly sustainable development means and how the concept is applied across different industry sectors. I will emphasize the importance of adapting sustainable practices to the specific needs and goals of companies. Next, we will discuss key regulations and standards that are currently shaping corporate strategies and focus on how these regulations impact corporate decisions and how companies can effectively integrate them into their business models. Through the practical examples and strategies, we will explore how companies successfully incorporate sustainable practices into their operations, and by looking at concrete cases from various industries, we will see which approaches have been most effective. And finally, we will focus on the latest trends and upcoming innovations in the world of sustainability reporting. So I will highlight what the future holds for ESG and ESG reporting and how companies can best prepare for the upcoming changes. So I hope that today's lecture will give you valuable insights and practical tips on how to make your business more sustainable. Because sustainability isn't just about ticking regulatory boxes, although staying compliant is, of course, very essential, but it is also about uncovering opportunities for growth, innovation, and gaining a competitive edge. So companies that embrace ESG principles early on are not only making and managing risks more effectively, but are also setting themselves up as leader in a market where sustainability is becoming more and more important. So before we delve into the regulations and requirements that sustainable businesses brings to companies, we must first ask ourselves, what does sustainable development even mean? So the most commonly used definition of sustainable development comes from the Bertrand report. I think that we all heard about it. It was published in 1987 by the United Nations Commission on Environment and Development. And in this report, sustainable development is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So this definition clearly emphasizes that sustainable development should not be based only on short-term benefits, but that all decisions must take into account their long-term impact. If we consume all natural resources without limits today, future generations will bear the consequences. So this applies to both the environmental and the social and economic fields. So to understand how sustainability works in practice, we need to know these three key pillars of sustainable development. The first one is environmental aspect. So E from ESG, environmental. So how do our activities impact the environment? This includes greenhouse gas emissions. We will talk about it on the next session. Consumption of natural resources, the circular economy, and biodiversity. The second one is S, social aspect. How do we care for people? Here we talk about human rights, equality, working conditions, and the impact of companies on communities. And of course, governance aspect. So how to ensure economic growth that does not harm the environment and society. Sustainable development means that companies must act responsibly while at the same time ensuring economic stability and profitability. So these three key pillars are interconnected. Without social stability and environmental protection, long-term economic growth is not possible. And in the later sections of this presentation, I will explore, or we will explore, each of these three pillars in a greater detail, providing a deeper insight into their real-world applications and significance. So let's take a look on how did the concept of sustainable development even evolve. Sustainable development did not emerge overnight, but evolved gradually. So the first major milestone was the Stockholm Conference on the Environment in 1972, where countries began to discuss seriously for the first time how economic development affects the environment. So this conference set the first guidelines for international environmental policy. The next major step was the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, where countries adopted Agenda 21, one of the first global action plans for sustainable development. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was also signed at the time, laying the foundation for later climate agreements, such as the 2015 Paris Agreement. And today we have more precisely defined sustainable development goals. In 2015, the United Nations adopted 17 sustainable development goals that we must achieve by 2030. And these goals include poverty eradication, reducing inequality, the fight against climate change, responsible use of resources, sustainable production, and many other global challenges. So in summary, sustainable development is not a new concept, but has been evolving for decades. Originally, it was primarily an ethical and environmental idea, but today it has become a crucial element of business strategies. Companies today are not only concerned with sustainability out of social responsibility, but also because of legal obligations. We will talk about that. Then consumers and investor expectations, and also financial opportunities brought by sustainable businesses. So in corporate world, sustainability is closely tied to ESG criteria, which provide a structured approach for responsible business conduct. And ESG factors have become one of the main benchmarks for evaluating corporate performance in financial markets, influencing investment decisions and shaping regulatory policies. So as sustainability becomes a core business concern, companies must align with various regulatory frameworks that shape ESG reporting and compliance. In the European Union, new sustainability regulations are setting clear expectations for corporate responsibility and transparency. But the key question is how to integrate sustainability into business operations. So today, companies face the challenge of integrating sustainable practices into our operations in a way that delivers both economic and social benefits while also complying with regulatory requirements. So we will explore answers to these questions throughout the lecture. So let's talk about the impact of ESG regulations. Why should companies even care about sustainability? Well, in the past, it was just a matter of corporate social responsibility. Today, however, it has become a business necessity. Companies adopt sustainable strategies not only to contribute to a better world, but also because they face stricter regulations, higher consumer expectations, financial challenges, and increasingly competitive market. So the European Union has introduced clear guidelines that require companies to report on their sustainability activities in increased detail. Three key regulations significantly influence business operation. The first one, I think you heard before of that, is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. This is CSRD, expands the number of companies required to report on sustainability. Larger companies must now disclose detailed information on the environment, social, and governance, so ESG impacts. Then it's EU taxonomy. We are tackling it right now in our company, defines which economic activities are considered sustainable. And this classification determines which companies can obtain green financing and ensures transparency for investors. And the third one is European Sustainability Reporting Standards, or ESRS, which specifies how companies must report on their ESG activities. So these and other directives will be mentioned several times during today's presentation and will be examined from different perspectives. And failing to adapt to these new requirements can result in financial penalties, restricted access to financing, and reputational damage. In Austria, for example, some banks and financial institutions have already tightened lending conditions for companies that do not meet ESG criteria, making it more difficult for them to secure funding. So beyond regulations, stakeholders, including customers, employees, and investors, are demanding greater corporate sustainability efforts. So consumers increasingly prefer sustainable products and services. Nielsen IQ, or NIQ, this is a global leader in consumers intelligence and market research, reports that 69% of consumers worldwide consider sustainability more important than 2 years ago. In Europe, growing awareness and stricter regulations are encouraging customers not only to expect sustainability from companies, but also to take responsibility by actively choosing sustainable options. Then we have employees, especially younger generations, wants to work for companies that take sustainability seriously. Companies that ignore sustainability find it harder to attract and keep top talent, which directly impacts their competitiveness. And investors and banks are integrating ESG factors into their financing decisions. Since 2022, more than 50% of investment funds in Europe apply ESG criteria, making it easier for sustainable companies to access capital. So without access to capital, businesses obviously can't grow. And sustainability has become a key factor in financial assessments, with banks, investment funds, and other lenders increasingly considering ESG factors when determining financing conditions. Companies with strong ESG practices can assess specialized financial instruments such as green loans and sustainability bonds, which offer more favorable financing terms. Regulators, including the European Central Bank, require banks to assess climate risks in their loan portfolios. And as a result, companies with high environmental risk will find it more challenging to obtain financing in the future. So companies that actively implement sustainability strategies gain a competitive advantage. Sustainable businesses practices enhance reputation, strengthen customers' trust, and reduce risks related to environmental and social issues. So several major companies demonstrate how sustainability drives success. For example, Unilever, this is a global consumer goods company, generates more than 50% of its revenue growth from sustainability, focused on brands like Persil, Dove, and, for example, Knorr. IKEA, investing heavily in the circular economy with commitment to making all products from renewable or recycled materials by 2030. And Tesla. Tesla did not only transform the automotive industry with electric vehicles, but also became one of the most valuable companies in the world. And later in the presentation, I will also present some of the criticism and challenges the company faces. Closer to home, OMV in Austria is adapting to new sustainability requirements by investing in renewable energy sources. And for example, Krka in Slovenia is focusing on improving environmental standards in its production. So statement sustainability is a necessity and not as a choice is a great statement, but taking sustainability seriously provides long-term benefits. It improves access to capital, enhances customer trust, reduces risks, and strengthens reputation. And companies that neglect sustainability face financial losses, regulatory sanctions, and reduce competitiveness. On the other hand, those that embed sustainability in their strategy will find it easier to raise capital, gain stakeholders' trust, and ensure long-term stability. So, to sum it up, let's quickly just revisit the key takeaways. Regulations are tightening, and companies that fail to comply risk financial and reputational consequences. Consumers, customers, employees, and investors are expecting businesses to responsibly act and sustainably, of course. Access to financing is increasingly linked to ESG performance. Companies with strong sustainability strategies gain a clear advantage. And sustainability isn't just about meeting requirements, it strengthens reputation, builds trust, and drives long-term success. So the bottom line, yes, sustainability is no longer optional, it is fundamental part of business success. So, like said before, ESG refers to three key areas that determine how a responsible company manages its impact on environmental, social, or environment, society, and governance structure. So, like we said, environment aspect or pillar is how a company affects the natural environment, including greenhouse gas emissions, energy and water consumption, waste management, and climate change adaptation strategies. Then social aspect, the company's relationships with employees, customers, suppliers, and the wider society, covering fair working conditions, occupational safety, diversity, and respect for human rights through the supply chain. And governance aspect, business ethics, transparency, accountability, including anti-corruption measures, corporate governance structures, and regulatory compliance. And although ESG and sustainable development are often linked, there is a key difference. So sustainable development is a broader concept that includes environmental, social, and economic aspect for long-term balanced growth. ESG, on the other hand, is a measurable framework that helps companies access and integrate sustainability into their business models. So companies can no longer ignore ESG as it directly affects their funding, business stability, and market competitiveness. And let's now explore three key reasons why ESG is now a business imperative. So ESG factors have become decisive criteria for banks and investors when evaluating companies. According to the Global Sustainable Investment Alliance, over $40 trillion in investments in 2023 were based on ESG criteria. With the introduction of EU taxonomy, companies with strong ESG practices benefit from easier access to capital and better financing terms. Banks are increasingly rewarding sustainable businesses with lower interest rates, while companies with high environmental risks face challenges in securing funding. So the European Union continues to enforce stricter sustainability regulations. Two major legislative frameworks shaping corporate responsibility are Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, mandates detailed ESG reporting under the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive requires companies to monitor ESG risks in their supply chains and ensures legal accountability for negative environmental and social impacts. Non-compliance with these regulations can result in higher fines and loss of investor confidence, making ESG an essential part of corporate governance. So sustainability is increasingly influencing consumers and employee decision-making. Nielsen IQ 2021 study found that 72% of consumers prefer buying from companies with a clear sustainability strategy, while PwC 2021 survey showed that 50% of consumers actively change their purchasing habits based on sustainability factors. Employees, particularly Generation Z, expect companies to prioritize ESG. According to Deloitte Millennial and Gen Z Survey 2022, 77% of Gen Z employees prefer to work for companies with strong ESG commitments. So companies failing to adapt risk losing customers, top talent, ultimately weakening their market position. So one of the most striking examples of how ESG impacts business is the story of BlackRock, the world's biggest investment fund. In 2020, their CEO, Larry Fink, made it pretty clear that companies that don't take ESG seriously are asking for trouble. He really didn't say literally like that, but he said that basically they wouldn't survive, and definitely hinted that ignoring ESG would mean facing bigger risks and losing out to competitors. So after that, BlackRock really stepped up its commitment to sustainable investments. They launched 93 new sustainable investment options in 2020, giving their clients a chance to move 39 billion into companies with strong ESG practices. In other words, they started putting money into businesses that were doing the right thing when it comes to the environment and social responsibility, while pulling the money away from those that weren't. And this move sent shockwaves through the financial world and made it clear that ESG wasn't just a buzzword anymore. It was a key part of making smart investment choices. It was a bit of a wake-up call for businesses everywhere. Get on board with sustainability or basically get left behind. But here's the fun fact. Even though BlackRock became a huge advocate for ESG, they've also faced a lot of criticisms over years from both sides. Some saying they are not doing enough, others saying they are pushing it too hard. So when it goes, that just shows that even the biggest players can't always make everyone happy. In Austria and Slovenia, ESG is also a key success factor. ESG group, Erste Group, Verbund, and OMV in Austria have integrated ESG reporting and are adapting their business models to sustainability goals. In Slovenia, several companies are increasingly focusing on sustainable production and reducing emissions. Krka, for instance, has made progress in this area, but other major players like Petrol and Atlantic Droga Kolinska are also adapting their business models to align with sustainability goals. From our perspective as an industrial peer, we have to give A1 some credit for their ESG efforts. Being part of large international group definitely gives them resources to move forward with sustainability, but it also comes with challenges like balancing global strategies with local expectations. So ESG is no longer just an ethics or about reputation. It is also a key business success factor. Regulations, access to capital and market expectations are forcing companies to integrate sustainability into their business strategies. Those that do so in a timely manner will be more competitive and resilient in the future. So now that we understand why ESG is essential, let's explore each of these three core pillars in more detail. A company's long-term success depends on balancing the three aspects, like we said, environmental, social, and governance. And focusing on just one while neglecting the others can lead to financial, legal, or reputational risk. For example, improving environmental performance while ignoring employee well-being can still result in public backlash, just as strong social initiatives can be undermined by weak governance. The environmental pillar of ESG examines how business impact the natural environment and their ability to manage environmental risks. Climate change, resource limitation, and increasingly strict regulations are in transforming corporate operations. In recent years, the European Union has introduced numerous measures to reduce emissions and promote sustainable practices. Companies that ignore environmental factors face higher operating costs, increased taxes, and difficulties accessing financing. On the other hand, companies that invest in sustainable solutions are not only reducing their environmental footprint, but also strengthen their competitive advantage. So, what do key environmental factors include? Carbon footprint and greenhouse gas emissions. Like I said, we will dedicate the next meeting to this topic. Climate change is one of the biggest global challenges. Governments and business worldwide are striving to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and other greenhouse gases. Reducing is not only helping fight climate change, but also improves companies' reputation and reduces costs through energy efficiency. With increasing pressure from consumers and regulators, proactive carbon management is becoming essential for long-term success. Then we have energy consumption and renewable energy sources. Energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy are key to reducing dependence on the fossil fuels. More and more companies are transitioning to solar, wind, and hydro energy, as this is not only reduces emissions, but also lowers long-term energy costs. Waste management and circular economy. The circular economy is becoming crucial strategy for reducing raw material consumption and waste generation. Companies that invest in recycling, material use, and production process optimization not only minimize their environmental impact, but also create new business opportunities. And also, of course, climate change adaptation. Extreme weather events such as droughts, floods, and heat waves pose growing risks for businesses. Adapting to these changes includes environmental risk management strategies, supply chains resilience, and critical infrastructure protection. So several companies have already set ambitious sustainability goals. Microsoft, for example, has announced that by 2030, it will become carbon negative, meaning it will remove more CO2 emissions that it produces. IKEA is developing a 100% circular product strategy, ensuring that all materials used are recyclable or renewable. The company aims to achieve net zero emissions by 2030. OMV is one of Austria's largest energy companies, and in recent years, they've been putting a lot of effort into investing in renewable energy. They're working to reduce their carbon footprint and gradually move away from fossil fuels. And then, of course, closer to home, to my at least, we at Telemax Slovenia, as part of United Group, are committing to getting to net zero emissions by 2040. Our targets for cutting emissions have been verified by the Science Based Targets initiatives. So it's not just a talk. We are actually making it happen. And we're focusing on reducing our environmental impact and bringing sustainable practices into our daily operations. And what does this mean for businesses? It means struggle, basically. Climate risks are already directly impacting business operations. Companies that fail to invest in sustainable solutions will pay higher taxes on emissions and struggle to obtain financing. On the other hand, companies that proactively reduce their carbon footprint and invest in renewable energy sources benefit from better financing conditions and increased attractiveness to investors and consumers. So in the next section, we will explore the social aspect of ESG and how companies manage their relationships with employees, customers, and the broader society. So the social aspect of ESG focuses on how company impacts people, basically, employees, consumers, suppliers, and the broader community. Companies that invest in employees and communities enjoy greater trust and customer loyalty. On the other hand, those that ignore social aspects risk reputational damage, legal sanctions, and even customer boycotts. Key areas of social responsibility are working conditions and employee rights. Employees are companies' most valuable asset. Organization must ensure safe working conditions, fair wages, and compliance with labor laws. Poor working conditions can lead to employee dissatisfaction, high turnover rates, and even legal disputes. Then we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. Companies that promote equal opportunities for all employees tend to be more innovative and successful. Research shows that businesses with higher diversity in leadership achieve better financial results and more attractive, and they are more attractive to investors. The next one is corporate social responsibility. Companies are playing an increasingly important role in supporting local communities. This may include investing in education, then healthcare, infrastructure development, or other social initiatives. And the last one is supply chains and human rights. So globalization means that businesses must also monitor their supply chains. If suppliers engage in forced labor or violate human rights, it can severely damage a company's reputation. So the European Union has introduced the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or CS3D, requiring companies to be accountable for their entire supply chain. So let's now see how can the social aspect impact business or businesses. One of the most tragic examples of how neglecting the social aspect of ESG can lead to disaster is the collapse of the Rana Plaza factory in Bangladesh in 2013. Rana Plaza was 8-story building in the city of Savar, housing several textile factories that produced clothing for global fashion brands like Primark, Benetton, Mango, Walmart, and many others. And what happened? The day before disaster, workers noticed large cracks in the walls and alert management to the danger. But despite their warnings, factory managers ordered the workers to return to work the next day to meet production deadlines. So just a few hours into a workday, the building collapsed, killing more than 1,130 workers and severely injuring over 2,500 others. And this remains one of the deadliest industrial disasters in history. So what and why did the disaster even happen? The tragedy revealed several critical issues in global supply chains. The first one was obviously poor safety standards. The building was poorly maintained and structurally unfit for high number of workers and also heavy machinery. Then lack of regulations. Bangladesh textile industry had weak safety oversight as the country sought to attract foreign brands with low-cost production. Pressure from low costs. Global fashion giants demanded low production costs, leading to worker exploitation and neglecting safety standards, and ignore warnings. Despite visible cracks in the building, workers were forced to continue working, fearing they would lose their jobs. So, how did the world respond to the disaster? The Rana Plaza tragedy sparked a global debate about the responsibility of fashion brands and increased pressure on companies to improve supply chain oversight. A court on fire and building safety in Bangladesh, over 200 global fashion brands signed an agreement to improve safety standards in Bangladesh's textile industry. Consumers and investors demanded ethical production. Companies were forced to disclose supply chain practices and implement sustainable strategies. And the European Union strengthened ESG regulations, especially through the CS3D directive, which requires companies to be accountable for their suppliers and production process. So what can companies learn from this? The Rana Plaza disaster is clear proof that ignoring ESG aspects is not just an ethical issue, it's a business risk. Companies that fail to monitor their suppliers are exposed to legal penalties, consumer boycotts, and loss of investor trust. So fashion brands today are increasingly investing in supply chain transparency and certified sustainability standards, but worker exploitation in the textile industry remains a serious challenge, not only in Bangladesh, but also in Pakistan, Cambodia, India, and, for example, Ethiopia. So other companies with positive social impact, Unilever, I mentioned it before, and I will a few times more, is one of the global leaders in corporative social responsibility. It promotes fair trade, reduces child labor in supply chains, and invests in local communities. This not only improves its reputation, but also reduces business risks. Patagonia, a manufacturer of outdoor clothing, goes even further. 100% of its profits are directed toward environmental and social projects. This strategy has increased customer loyalty and positioned the company as a global leader in sustainable business. So what does this mean for businesses? The social aspect of ESG is not only and just a moral obligation, it is also a business opportunity. Companies that invest in employee well-being and society benefit from greater customer loyalty, easier talent acquisition, and increased resilience to crisis. On the other hand, those that violate employee rights or collaborate with unethical suppliers risk legal sanctions, consumer boycotts, or loss of investors. And the last pillar, G, so ESG, governance. The governance aspect of ESG addresses how a company makes decisions, how it's structured, and ensures business transparency. So strong governance is the foundation of successful and ethical business operations and plays a crucial role in companies' long-term stability. Companies with clear governance structures and high ethical standards are more likely to gain investors and regulatory trust. Conversely, lack of transparency, poor corporate governance, and unethical practices can lead to financial scandals, legal consequences, and reputational damage. So, when we talk about governance, we often think about the four key pillars: accountability, transparency, responsibility, and fairness. And these pillars set the foundation for good corporate governance. But in practice, governance goes even deeper. There are several critical areas that companies must address to ensure effective governance in long-term success. The first one is transparency and ethical business conduct. Companies must clearly communicate their goals, performance, and risks. Without proper transparency, investors and consumers face uncertainty, which can impact a company's market value and access to capital. Then, good corporate governance ensures that a company has an independent board of directors that oversees management decisions and safeguards long-term interests of a company and its stakeholders. Without effective oversight, companies risk mismanagement, conflicts of interests, and poor decision-making. Anti-corruption measures. Corruption poses a significant risk to business operations. Without robust internal mechanisms to prevent bribery and unethical practices, companies face legal and financial repercussions. And the last one is obviously the ESG reporting. Companies must provide regular and high-quality reporting on their sustainability practices. The European Union, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, requires companies to disclose detailed ESG data, ensuring greater accountability and transparency. So, how does the governance aspect impact business? Weak governance can lead companies to serious trouble. Two of the biggest corporate scandals in recent years serve as clear examples of the consequences of poor governance. So, the Volkswagen scandal, known as Dieselgate, is one of the most infamous cases of corporate fraud. Many may still remember it. In 2015, revelations shook the automotive industry and demonstrated how poor governance and unethical business practices can threaten a company's stability. So, what happened? Between 2009 and 2015, Volkswagen installed software in its diesel vehicles that could detect when a car was undergoing an official emissions test. During testing, the system automatically reduced nitrogen oxide emissions to meet environmental standards. However, under real driving conditions, the vehicles emitted up to 40 times more harmful pollutions than permitted by US and European regulators. The Environmental Protection Agency exposed the fraud in September 2015 when it discovered discrepancies between laboratory tests results and actual vehicle emissions. So, what was the consequences for Volkswagen? Obviously, fines and costs. Volkswagen was forced to pay over 30 billion euros in fines, settlements, and vehicle repair costs worldwide. Then, of course, reputational damage. The company suffered from significant loss of trust among consumers and investors, leading to a more than 30% drop in stock value within weeks of the scandal's exposure. Lawsuits and vehicle recalls. Volkswagen had to recall approximately 11 million vehicles globally and found programs to improve emission standards and leadership changes. Volkswagen CEO Martin Winterkorn resigned, and several senior executives were indicated or criminally prosecuted. So key lessons for businesses. Data manipulation and lack of transparency can cause irreparable reputational damage. ESG is not just about legal compliance. Investors and consumers expect responsible corporate behavior, and regulatory bodies such as EPA, European Commission, and other environmental agencies are becoming increasingly strict and monitoring corporate sustainability practices. Just a moment, please. So, after seeing the impact of Dieselgate scandal, let's examine another example of poor governance, but this time in the banking sector. So let's look at the largest money laundering case in Europe. The Danske Bank scandal is considered one of the biggest money laundering cases in European history, and clearly demonstrates how lack of internal controls can lead to systematic financial misconduct. So what happened here? Between 2007 and 2015, approximately $230 billion in suspicious transactions followed through Danske Bank's Estonia branch. A significant portion of these funds was linked to Russia and other former Soviet states, with strong indicators that the money was connected to criminal activities, tax evasion, and corruption. Internal whistleblower Howard Wilkinson, who worked at Danske Bank Estonia's branch, had already raised concerns about irregularities in 2013. However, the bank's leadership failed to take action. It was only when European regulators launched through investigation in 2017 that the case became public. What were the consequences for Danske Bank? Fines and settlements. Bank was ordered to pay $2 billion in fines to regulators and the US and Europe. Exit from foreign markets. Following the scandal, Danske Bank withdrew from Estonia and several other countries. Loss of trust and stock value decline. The bank's market value was cut in half within a few years after scandal was relieved. And leadership changes and criminal investigations. Several top executives resigned, and some faced criminal prosecutions. So, lessons for companies. The Danske Bank case clearly demonstrates how a lack of internal oversight and ignoring warnings can lead to serious financial and legal consequences. Key lessons for companies include: a strong governance system is essential. Without effective internal controls and fraud prevention mechanisms, companies are more exposed to risks. And important, whistleblowers play a crucial role. Companies must establish clear procedures for safe reporting of misconduct, as early detection can prevent greater damage. And regulators are becoming stricter. Companies that fail to comply with anti-money laundering laws and other financial regulations face hefty fines, legal sanctions, and restricted access to financing. So the importance of strong governance for business, the governance aspect of ESG is not just an internal organizational matter. It is critical for long-term business stability. Companies with strong governance structures are more attractive to investors as they minimize risks, related to unethical business practices, then more stable as they effectively manage risks and prevent financial scandals, and more resilient to crisis as they have clear procedures for managing unexpected challenges. On the other hand, a lack of transparency, poor governance, and failure to comply with regulators can result in financial losses, reputational damage, and legal consequences. So, for conclusion, good ESG practices are not just about environmental and social initiatives. Without a strong governance system, a company cannot successfully implement sustainability strategies, and long-term stability can only be achieved when a company is strong in all three ESG areas, environmental, social, and governance. If one of these areas is weak, the company is exposed to greater risks and potential losses. In the next section, we will examine the ESG regulatory framework and how businesses can align their operations with legal requirements. So when discussing ESG, it is essential to recognize that sustainability challenges vary by industry. What is critical for one sector may not be as relevant for another. Some industries primarily face environmental risks, such as high emissions and resource consumption, while others must focus more on social and governance aspects, such as working conditions and ethical business practices. Because of these differences, ESG is not a one-size-fits-all concept. In the following sections, we will analyze how ESG impacts key industries, their biggest sustainability challenges, and best practices that companies are adopting to stay competitive. So let's explore how ESG impacts different industries and identify some of the biggest challenges that businesses still need to address. The first one is energy sector and ESG challenges. So is the transition to renewables really that simple? Energy companies are under significant pressure to reduce CO2 emissions as they are among the largest polluters. The world is shifting away from fossil fuels, but this transition is far from easy. The European Union mandates that by 2030, at least 42.5% of energy must come from renewable sources, requiring major changes in the energy industry. Many companies are already closing coal-fired power plants and investing in solar, wind, and hydropower. A good example is Ørsted, a Danish company that once relied heavily on coal, but today generates 100% of its energy from renewable sources. It has become a global leader in wind energy. However, renewable energy also presents new challenges that should be not overlooked. What about the waste? Renewable energy sources are undoubtedly cleaner than coal and oil, but a key question arises. What happens to all the equipment at the end of its life cycle? Solar panels and wind turbines have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years. Yet there is still no efficient recycling system for them. Most decommissioned wind turbine blades end up in landfills as they are difficult to process. According to International Renewable Energy Agency, by 2050, solar panel waste could reach 43 million tons. This means that we must already be thinking about how to recycle and reuse these materials. Some solutions are emerging, such as using old wind turbine blades in the cement industry, but the sector is still searching for more effective waste management methods. And now let's talk about space dilemma. Renewable energy is not entirely impact-free. Wind farms can threaten birds, especially large leopards, which sometimes collide with turbine blades. In some cases, wind farm locations have had to be adjusted to protect endangered species. In Spain, for example, plans for new wind farms were changed to protect bird populations. Hydropower plants also have significant negative effects on river ecosystem. They alter natural water flow, which affects fish populations and the entire ecosystem. So environmentalists warn when building new hydropower plants, it is crucial to avoid causing more harm than good. And the social challenge here is resistance from the local communities. While most people support the transition to cleaner energy, they often do not want renewable projects near their homes. This is now known as the NIM by BY effect, or not in my backyard. So many communities complain that wind turbines generate noise, which they do, which can be disruptive for residents. In Ireland, several wind farms projects had to be halted due to public opposition over noise and visual impact of the landscape. Additionally, poor communication between companies and local residents often increases resistance to new sustainability projects. So renewable energy is the future, but not without challenges. Renewable energy is key to greener future, but in addition to its benefits, we also must consider the challenges it presents. For the energy transition to be truly sustainable, solutions must be found for waste from solar panel and wind turbines, environmental impact on ecosystem and wildlife, and of course, collaboration with the local communities to ensure projects are widely accepted. This means that energy companies must not only focus on switching to renewables, but also consider how to make these sources sustainable in all ESG aspects. So we often hear that sustainable finance is changing the game, but is it really moving the needle on climate change and social issues? Now let's take a closer look at how financial institutions are approaching ESG and whether it is truly driving capital toward a better future. Financial institutions play a crucial role in sustainable development as they channel capital into green projects and companies with responsible business practices. In recent years, a demand for sustainable investments has surged, proving that ESG is no longer just an ethical consideration, but a key factor in investment decisions. One of the biggest ESG success stories is in the financial sector is growth of sustainable investments. According to Global Sustainable Investment Alliance, by 2023, more than $40 trillion had been allocated to ESG funds, meaning that sustainable investments account for 1/3 of total global assets under management. This clearly indicates that investors are increasingly considering environmental, social, and governance factors when deciding where to allocate capital. In addition, banks and financial institutions are increasingly offering green loans and sustainable bonds. Green loans are designed for companies financing projects aimed at reducing emissions, improving energy efficiency, or developing renewable energy sources. Sustainable bonds allow investors to support projects with clearly defined environmental and social benefits. But despite these positive trends, the financial sector still faces significant challenges. While ESG financing is expanding rapidly, a major concern is how to ensure that these investments are genuinely sustainable and not just a part of greenwashing trend. Greenwashing occurs when companies or institutions market green investments or products without real sustainability impact. This presents a serious challenge for investors and regulators, as it is crucial to ensure the credibility of sustainability claims. So, what does all of this really mean in the financial sector? Is it enough to just claim sustainability, or do we need solid proof to back it up? The financial industry must ensure that ESG investments are genuinely sustainable and not just a marketing strategy. And this means that the content and reporting of ESG investment must be clearly documented and verifiable. So investors need reliable and concrete data to support claims about sustainable projects, and regulations such as EU taxonomy for sustainable activities are a step in the right direction, but there is still much work to be done in ensuring fairness and transparency in financial products. So the key challenges include ensuring the credibility of ESG claims and preventing greenwashing, developing new standards for accurate and consistent ESG investment reporting, aligning different regulatory frameworks on a global scale as ESG investment standards remain highly diverse and evolving. So the financial sector plays a crucial role in directing capital toward a sustainable future. Companies and institutions focused on sustainable investing will have a long-term competitive advantage. However, it is essential that the sector also ensures the credibility of these investments and avoids a risk of greenwashing, as this could undermine investor trust and threaten the long-term stability of the financial system. So now let's focus a bit on technology industry. We often think that the tech industry as the leader in innovation and progress, but is a digital future really a sustainable one? Technology companies are often seen as sustainability innovators, investing in advanced technologies, artificial intelligence, and digitalizing business processes. So, however, this does not mean that they are free from environmental and social challenges. Data centers consume enormous amounts of electricity. AI raises ethical concerns, and the industry struggles with the diversity and inclusion issues. One example of a tech giant committed to sustainability is Google, which operates the world's largest carbon neutral network of data centers. Their goal is to power 100% of their operations with renewable energy by 2030 without relying on carbon offsets. While Google is committed to carbon neutrality, it's impressive. The reality is that the technology sector as a whole still faces major challenges in achieving this goal. One of the biggest obstacles is the enormous energy consumption of data centers. The technology industry may not pollute the same way as heavily industry on the energy sector, but its data centers consume vast amounts of electricity. Every time we use search engines, stream videos, store data in the cloud, or run AI models, data is processed and transmitted to data centers that operate 24/7. So according to the International Energy Agency, the technology sector accounts for approximately 1% of global electricity consumption, and with the rapid growth of artificial intelligence and cloud computing, this share is expected to increase significantly. Many companies claim to be carbon neutral, but they often achieve this by purchasing carbon offsets rather than reducing their actual emissions. Critics urge that offsets are not long-term solutions, companies must generally reduce energy consumption rather than just compensate for emissions. So, as previously mentioned, technology companies, despite being seen as pioneers of innovation and progress, still face significant challenges when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Research shows that leadership positions in tech firms are still predominantly held by men, particularly in software development and AI research. Their homogeneous workforce can lead to bias and AI algorithms and digital services. Additionally, many companies have faced criticism over poor working conditions in their manufacturing supply chains. For example, Apple has been accused of working with suppliers in China that exploit labor and fail to provide adequate working conditions. And the main question here is who controls artificial intelligence? Technology companies are heavily investing in artificial intelligence development, which has a profound impact on society and economy. But AI raises serious ethical concerns, which the industry has only recently begun to address. One of the biggest challenges is algorithmic bias. So artificial intelligence systems learn from historical data, which is often incomplete or discriminatory, leading to biased outcomes. A well-known case occurred at Amazon, where they developed an AI-powered hiring system. Due to biased training data, the algorithm favored male candidates over female candidates, as historical data showed that leadership positions were traditionally held by men. Additionally, governments are introducing regulations to increase transparency in artificial intelligence development, and European Union's proposed Artificial Intelligence Act aims to establish clear rules on how sensitive data is used and what safeguards must be built into AI systems. So, conclusion, the tech industry is an innovator, but also a source of ESG risk. Technology companies have a major influence on sustainable development, but they must also address significant ESG challenges. The biggest issues remain high energy consumption of data centers, lack of diversity and inclusion in the industry, bias in artificial intelligence algorithms, and ethical concerns about digital future. If the technology sector wants to remain a leader in sustainability, it must ensure that its innovators are not only advanced, but also fair, energy efficient, and ethical. While the technology sector is addressing issues related to artificial intelligence ethics and energy consumption, the automotive industry is undergoing a major transformation driven by ESG trends. The focus here is on reducing emissions, transitioning to electrical vehicles, and ensuring sustainable supply chains. So while the tech industry, like we said, grapples with diversity and inclusion challenges, the automotive sector is facing a different kind of transformation, one driven by the push toward electrical vehicles. And let's take a closer look. The automotive industry had undergone significant transformation over the past decade due to ESG trends. Climate policies and stricter emission standards are pushing car manufacturers to reduce CO2 emissions and transition to electrical vehicles. The European Union has introduced one of the most ambitious measures from 2035, the sale of new internal combustion engine cars will be banned in the EU. This means that all manufacturers will have to shift to electric or other low carbon propulsion systems. There are still some expectation, of course, being discussed, like allowing vehicles that run on carbon neutral fuels. So it's not internally set in stone yet. But one of the key players in the transition to electric mobility is Tesla, of course, which was among the first brands to prove that electrical vehicles can be just as powerful and desirable as gasoline cars. Tesla had set trends in multiple areas. Battery technology, the development of 4680 battery cells enables longer range and lower production costs. Charging infrastructure, Tesla has built the largest global network of fast chargers, making electric vehicles use more convenient and sustainable production. The company is committed to battery recycling and reduction the carbon footprint of its manufacturing progress. Despite the rapid development of electrical vehicles technology, the automotive industry still faces major ESG challenges. One of the biggest paradoxes is that while electric vehicles produce no emissions while driving, their production comes with a significant environmental costs. The biggest challenge lies in the batteries, which require critical raw materials such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Battery production itself is a complex process with major sustainability challenges. For instance, sourcing these raw materials often involves intensive mining practices that can seriously harm the environment. As we transition to electric vehicles, the demand for these materials is skyrocketing, putting even more pressure on mining operations. But the challenge don't stop here. Once we have the batteries, we still need the infrastructure to charge them. While the number of charging stations is increasing, the reality is that charging infrastructure is still underdeveloped, especially in rural areas. Unlike conventional gas stations, which are easily accessible almost anywhere, charging stations are not yet as widely available, making long-distance travel in electrical vehicle a real challenge. And then there's the problem of recycling. As more and more electrical vehicles hit the road, we're also creating a massive volume of used batteries. Recycling them is complicated and costly, and current technologies can only recover a portion of the materials. The diagram on the right shows the life cycle of lithium-ion battery from raw material extraction and manufacturing to use, secondary use, and eventual disposal. Ideally, we should aim to reuse and recycle as much as possible, but the reality is that we are still far from achieving a full circular economy. To make electrical vehicles truly sustainable, we need to address not only the emissions during the use, but also the entire life cycle, from mining to recycling. Automakers are facing increasing pressure to ensure that every step of the process is both ethical and environmental responsible. As mentioned in the previous slide, a major obstacle in electric vehicle production lies in the supply chain of battery materials. Although electrical vehicles are considered a cleaner alternative to conventional cars, sourcing essential raw materials raises significant ethical and environmental challenges. So, where do electrical vehicles' batteries actually come from? The most critical materials are lithium, cobalt, and nickel, all essential for making efficient and long-lasting batteries. But sourcing these materials responsibly is far from straightforward. Let's take a cobalt for an example. Over 70% of global cobalt supply comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. While this region is rich in natural resources, it's also one of the poorest and most conflict-affected areas in the world. Unfortunately, cobalt mining here is often associated with child labor, forced labor, and extremely poor working conditions. This makes cobalt sourcing a huge ethical dilemma for manufacturers who are trying to sell green products while indirectly supporting unethical mining practices. Next, we have lithium. Lithium mining mainly takes place in countries like Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia, where it's extracted from salt flats. The process requires huge quantities of water, a big problem in regions already struggling with water scarcity. In some areas, local communities are facing water shortages and ecosystems are being harmed as a result. And finally, there's nickel. Nickel mining, especially in places like Indonesia and Philippines, is known for causing deforestation and soil degenerations. So processing nickel or also produces harmful waste that can pollute nearby water sources and damage local ecosystems. So what's the key challenge here? Automakers need to ensure responsible and ethical supply chains to minimize environmental and social harm. As the demand for electrical vehicles continue to grow, so does the need for transparent and sustainable sourcing practices. So we have covered some challenging topics so far. I hope it was interesting. And I believe this is a good moment to take a short 15-minute break, if you agree. And when we will return, we will continue to examine how these issues extend beyond just environmental impacts and through social challenges and working conditions, particularly in industry like automotive and technology. So take time to recharge. We will be back shortly and we'll move on then. Great. So before the break, we explored the environmental and financial challenges related to renewable energy in the tech industry. And now we will shift our focus to the social and governance challenges, particularly how industries are addressing working conditions and the social impact of technological progress. So let's start by looking at how the automotive and tech sectors are tackling these issues, following by a closer examination of social responsibility challenges in the retail and FMCG sectors. So first, working conditions and social challenges. The automotive industry is not only facing environmental challenges, but also social and governance issues. So one of the most controversial cases involves Tesla, which has frequently been accused of poor working conditions in its factories. Reports have cited excessive working hours, high pressure environments, and efforts to suppress labor unions. Traditional automakers like Volkswagen and General Motors are also facing challenges in ensuring fair treatment of workers during the transition to electrical vehicle production. And since electric vehicles require fewer components than traditional cars, there is a growing concern that job losses in the automotive sector could have significant social and economic consequences. So, as said before, the transition to the electrical vehicles raises concerns about accessibility. Electric cars remain more expensive than conventional vehicles, making them less affordable for many consumers. And despite government subsidies and declining battery costs, electrical vehicles are still financially out of reach for many people. Also, charging infrastructure is unevenly developed, While cities have adequate charging networks, rural and areas are still underserved, making electrical vehicle ownership less practical for residents in those regions. So, where does this all leave us? Electric vehicles are undoubtedly an important step toward reducing emissions, but they are far from a perfect solution. Yes, electrical vehicles solve one major problem. They produce lower emissions while driving, which is crucial for tackling climate change and reducing urban air pollution. But as we've seen, they also create a whole new set of challenges. First, there are ethical and environmental challenges in raw material sourcing, mining critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, and nickel often leads to human rights violations and severe environmental impacts. Then we have accessibility issues. Electrical vehicles remain significantly more expensive than traditional vehicles, and the charging infrastructure is still lacking in many regions. This makes the adoption of electric mobility slow and limited to certain areas. We can't also ignore the social impact. The shift to electric vehicle production is reshaping the automotive job market. With fewer components and different skill requirements, job losses and shifts are inevitable. Plus, there's the ongoing pressure to ensure fair labor practices through the supply chain. And finally, we have to consider the bigger picture of sustainability. True sustainability means more than just electrification. It requires rethinking the entire life cycle of vehicles, from responsible sourcing and manufacturing to recycling and waste management. The graph on the right shows the projected mineral demand for green technologies from 2021 to 2050. And as you can see, the demand for minerals like copper, nickel, and lithium is expected to skyrocket, which means that without more sustainable practices, we risk creating new environmental problems while trying to solve old ones. So, what's the key takeaway? Electrical vehicles are just one piece of the puzzle. To truly make a positive impact, we need to go beyond electrification and address social, environmental, and economic challenges holistically. So, unlike industries that rely on heavy infrastructure and energy consumption, the retail sector's ESG challenges are deeply tied to consumer behavior and ethical supply chains. So, when it comes to retail and fast-moving consumer goods, or FMCG, one of the big questions we're facing is whether companies are genuinely embracing sustainability or just greenwashing their image. There are a lot of ESG challenges in this sector, and it's not always easy to tell the difference between real progress and clever marketing. Retail companies are under increasing pressure to reduce their environmental impact and improve ethical practices in supply chains. The European Union is introducing stricter regulations on packaging and production, while consumers are becoming more aware and demanding sustainable products. However, the key question remains: are companies genuinely transforming their business models, or it is just greenwashing? So, misleadingly portraying a company as environmental friendly. The textile industry, the fast fashion problem. The fashion industry faces some of the most significant ESG problems or challenges. Fast fashion encourages companies to produce massive quantities for low-cost clothing, which consumers quickly discard. Major issues are environmental impact. The fashion industry is responsible for 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions and uses more water than any industry except agriculture. Plastic microfibers. Most cheap clothing is made from synthetic materials such as polyester and nylon, which release microplastics into water ecosystems when washed. And of course, poor working conditions. Many garments are produced in low-wage countries where salaries are low and working conditions are often inhumane. A good example of this dilemma is H&M. The company promotes recycling programs and the use of sustainable materials. However, its business model still relies on mass production of low-cost clothing, much of which is discarded quickly. This raises the question, is H&M truly committed to sustainability, or is it just another case of greenwashing? Sustainability challenges in the FMCG sector go beyond fashion. Retailers and manufacturers are also addressing issues related to waste management, then packaging and ethical supply chains. So let's take a look on how Slovenia and Austria regulate this area. In Slovenia, a new law on textile waste management came into effect in 2025. This legislation ensures better regulation and promotes the use of recycling or textile materials. In Austria, retailers are increasingly committed to the principles of circular economy. Textile companies must report on how they manage old clothing and what measures they take to reduce the environmental impact. And at the EU level, or EU level, obviously, new regulations are also being introduced under the EU strategy for sustainable and circular textiles from 2025 onward. All clothing must contain a minimum percentage of recycled fibers. So let's take a look at another major challenge in FMCG sector, which is packaging and plastic waste. Companies produce millions of tons of plastic packaging each year, much of which ends up in oceans or landfills. The main problems include excessive use of plastic. Most food and cosmetic packaging is still made from non-biodegradable plastic. Hope you understood. Inefficient recycling systems. According to the European Commission, less than 30% of plastic packaging is actually recycled. And ocean pollution. By 2050, there could be more plastic than fish in the oceans if plastic consumption is not reduced. And I looked at this three times, couldn't believe it, but many studies shows that this is true. So EU regulations on this area are by 2030, all packaging in the EU must be 100% recyclable. And by 2040, single-use packaging will be banned if a sustainable alternative is available. So, for example, companies like Nestlé have already introduced 100% recyclable packaging, but consumers point out that recycling remains inefficient and does not solve the problem of excessive waste production. So let's talk about ethics in supply chains. What happens behind the scenes? One of the biggest challenges in the FMCG industry is supply chain ethics, as raw materials are often sourced from countries where working conditions are poor, wages are low, and workers' rights are frequently violated. Key challenges are forced labor and child labor in supply chain, particularly in the production of cocoa, coffee, and cotton. Unfair trade. Many farmers and in developing countries receive extremely low payments for their products, and carbon footprint of transportation. FMCG products always often travel thousands of kilometers before reaching store shelves. If I may address this of us ladies here, I'd like to mention Temu, for example, and Shein. And just to put it there, we all know what I'm talking about. So let's look at how governments are responding to these issues by introducing stricter regulations to ensure greater accountability. So both the obviously EU and Austria have taken significant steps in this direction. One of the most important measures in the EU level is CS3D, adopted in June 13, 2024 and in force since June 25. And this directive requires companies to monitor their supply chains and impose sanctions if human rights violations are detected. So member states have until July 2026 to integrate this directive into their national laws. In Austria, this directive is already in effect. It mandates that large companies prove the absence of forced labor in their supply chains, ensuring greater accountability and transparency. So, is the FMCG sector truly becoming sustainable? The fast-moving consumer goods industry is among the most polluting sectors, making change essential. The key ESG challenges include fast fashion, excessive textile waste and poor working conditions, plastic packaging, overproduction of plastic and inefficient recycling, and supply chains, forced labor and unfair trade practices. So for the FMCG industry to become truly sustainable, companies must do more than just promote green initiatives. They need to fundamentally change how their products are produced and distributed. So we have explored how ESG affects different industries and regulatory frameworks, but how it does translate into everyday business operations. Let's now examine how ESG influences financing, reputation, compliance, and overall efficiency. As mentioned earlier, ESG is no longer an ethical choice or regulatory obligation. It's becoming a key factor for companies' long-term success. In this section, we will explore how companies or businesses can integrate ESG into their strategies and how it impacts their financial performance. Embedding ESG in business operations is not just about risk reduction, it also creates opportunities for increased companies' value, better access to capital, and longer stakeholders' trust. So let's take a closer look how ESG directly influences business performance. So first is access to capital. So better financing for companies with ESG strategies. We talked about that. Banks and investment funds no longer evaluate companies solely based on financial indicators. They are increasingly considering ESG factors. Companies with strong ESG practices have an easier time securing favorable loans and attracting investments and investors, of course. Banks and investors assess ESG risks. A company that fails to manage its environmental and social risk may be perceived as a higher long-term investment risk, and so the sustainable finance market is growing rapidly. According to the European Central Bank, green bonds and sustainable financial instruments are among the fastest growing segments of capital markets. So when it comes to ESG regulations, companies really only have two choices: adapt or face the consequences. As the regulations continue to evolve and become more stringent, compliance is no longer just nice to have, it's a business necessity. More and more countries are introducing mandatory ESG reporting and regulations that require greater corporate transparency. Companies that fail to adapt risk higher fines, losing investors, and restricted market access. So the European Union has adopted the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, which mandates detailed ESG reporting for all large companies. The EU taxonomy defines which business activities are generally sustainable, influencing investment and financing decisions. And when it comes to operational efficiency, ESG is just not just a cost, but it is actually a long-term saving strategy. Companies that implement sustainable practices often find that ESG goes beyond just regulatory compliance. It becomes an opportunity to streamline operations and improve efficiency in ways that also boost the bottom line. For example, investing in energy efficiency doesn't just reduce carbon emissions, it also lowers operating costs by cutting down the energy consumption. Similarly, waste reduction minimizes production costs, making process more cost-effective and resource efficient. And it's not just about cutting costs. They are also people factor. When employees feel valued and supported through sustainable practices, they tend to be more satisfied and engaged, which means lower turnover and higher performance. So in short, companies that see ESG as long-term investment rather than just compliance obligation can achieve significant savings and operational benefits. So conclusion is that ESG is really not just a trend, but a long-term business strategy. Companies that integrate ESG into their business models early gain competitive advantage. So ESG is not just about environmental responsibility, it is also a driver of financial success, market reputation, and long-term stability. So now we have explored how ESG directly influences business success. And now let's take a closer look at the legal frameworks companies must follow to successfully integrate ESG principles into their strategies. Sustainability, like we said before, is no longer just a voluntary choice. Regulations are becoming stricter, meaning that companies must comply with clear rules if they want to operate in the European market. So again, why are regulatory frameworks important? Because regulatory frameworks provide clear guidelines for companies on how to integrate sustainability into their business practices. Companies that comply with these legal requirements reduce the risk of penalties, gain better access to financing, and build stronger stakeholders' trust. Additionally, these regulations enable companies to operate responsibly and sustainably, which is crucial for their long-term success in the market. In recent years, the European Union has taken significant steps to tighten ESG regulations and shift from voluntary to mandatory reporting frameworks. And these regulations not only encourage responsible business practices, but also aim to create a level playing field by standardizing sustainability disclosures. So one of the key objectives is to ensure that companies are transparent and accountable in their sustainability practices. This means that businesses must regularly report on their environmental, social, and governance impacts using clear and comparable data. This is so very important. And by doing so, the EU is pushing companies to integrate sustainability into their core strategies rather than treating it as an afterthought. So the transition from voluntary to mandatory reporting is crucial because it helps investors and stakeholders make informed decisions. Companies that fail to comply with this new regulation risk penalties and reputational damage, as well as reduce access to financing. So now that we have already mentioned several times these key ESG regulations, it's important to take a moment to highlight the three core frameworks shaping the sustainability landscape in the EU. We have the CSRD, the SFDR, and the EU taxonomy. Each of these frameworks play a crucial role in how companies approach sustainability reporting and transparency. They set a clear expectation for business practices, helping to align corporate strategies with European sustainability goals. And as we move forward, we will take a closer look at these regulations and how they impact business operations. For now, it's important to understand that these regulations are no longer just voluntary guidelines. They have become mandatory requirements that are significantly influence how companies plan and report their sustainability efforts. So the first one is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. This is a major ESG regulation that expands the reporting obligations to a much larger number of companies compared to the previous non-financial reporting directive. Previously, only companies meeting certain criteria, such as company size, were required to report on their environmental and social impacts. The CSRD significantly broadens this requirement to include more businesses. So, what does the CSRD require? Companies must report on their sustainability activities and their impact on the environment, social, and governance. This includes disclosing information of carbon footprint, resource management, human rights and supply chains, and ESG risk management. Companies must follow the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ESRS, to ensure consistent, transparent, and reliable reporting. And external audits are now mandatory to verify the accuracy and reliability of ESG reports. Implementation time is 2024. So last year, the directive applied to companies already covered by NFRD. 2025, large companies with over 250 employees or 4 million euros in revenue must comply. And next year, 2026, the directive will extend to medium-sized companies. So what does this mean for businesses? Companies that are not yet prepared for ESG reporting must act quickly, as incomplete reporting can lead to penalties and reduce access to financing. Poor ESG disclosure can also damage a company's reputation among investors and consumers, signaling a lack of commitment to environmental and social responsibility. So, the next one is Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, or SFDR. It primarily applies to financial institutions such as banks, investment funds, and insurance companies. The regulation aims to increase transparency in sustainable investments, ensuring that investors receive clear and reliable information about which investments truly contribute to sustainability goals. Key requirements are: companies must disclose the real impact of their investment on sustainability and explain how their investments affect the environment and society. Greenwashing is prohibited. Financial institutions cannot mislead investors by labeling investments as sustainable if they do not meet actual sustainability criteria. And the regulation classifies ESG funds into categories to help investors identify generally sustainable investments. For example, Article 8 and Article 9 funds indicate different level of sustainability commitment. Why is this important? Well, banks and investment funds are avoiding companies that do not meet ESG criteria, as these businesses represent higher long-term investment risks. Regulators continue to tighten requirements, ensuring that financial institutions only support truly sustainable investment. And EU taxonomy. We mentioned EU taxonomy. It is a classification system that defines which economic activities are generally sustainable. This system is designed to help companies and investors identify which business activities truly contribute to climate goals and sustainable development. So what does the EU taxonomy cover? It is a list of sustainable economic activities that contribute to climate action and other EU sustainability goals. Companies must assess how much of their business aligns with the taxonomy and ensure their activities support EU objectives, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting biodiversity. The taxonomy focuses on key sectors, including energy, transport, industry, construction, and agriculture, which have the most significant impact on climate change and sustainability. So why does this matter? Companies that want to attract ESG focused investors must prove that their activities align with the EU taxonomy. So businesses that fail to meet these criteria may struggle to secure sustainable investments, limiting their access to capital. To summarize the importance of ESG regulations, companies that proactively comply with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, Sustainable Financial Disclosure Regulation, and EU taxonomy gain competitive advantages, reduce business risks, and secure their long-term market position. So Austria has adopted the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, which applies to all companies subject to European ESG reporting standards. Businesses that do not timely and accurately report their environmental, social, and governance impacts may face financial fines and legal consequences. In addition to monetary penalties, non-compliant companies risk damaging their reputation and losing access to investment opportunities. These sanctions are incorporated into national laws implementing EU directives, posing substantial challenges for companies and fail to comply. So what are the sanctions for non-compliance? Austrian laws establish penalties for companies that fail to meet new ESG reporting obligations. Businesses that do not timely and adequately report on their environmental, social, and governance impacts will face financial fines and legal consequences. Companies that fail to comply not only face financial penalties, but also risk significant reputational harm and limited access to investment. And this is basically throughout all EU. So these sanctions are incorporated into national laws enforcing EU directives, creating serious challenges for non-compliant companies, including reputational damage and restricted access to financing. And mandatory reporting in line with European standards. Austria and Slovenia, of course, complies with ESG reporting standards such as European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ensuring companies align with EU regulations. Companies are required to clearly document and report their environmental, social, and governance practices. Additionally, these reports must undergo independent auditing. That is really important to state now that the new thing is independent auditing or revision to ensure the credibility and accuracy of the this disclosed information. So for those interested in assessing your company's sustainability practices in compliance status, I encourage you to check the ESG metrics tool provided by the Austrian Chamber of Commerce. The link is available at the bottom of this slide for more detailed information. So let's move on to Austrian Supply Chain Act. I think it's important for you to know that Austria is planning to introduce a law in line with the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or CS3D, requiring companies to actively monitor and ensure compliance with human rights and environmental standards within their supply chains. While the law is not yet in force, the proposed legislations outlines the obligations related to the following aspects. So compliance with human rights and environmental standards in supply chains. Companies operating in Austria will be expected to ensure that their suppliers respect fundamental human rights, such as decent working conditions, fair wages, and the prevention of forced or child labor. They will also be responsible for managing the environmental impact of their supply chains, including reduction emissions, waste management, and sustainable use of natural resources. Then mandatory supply chain monitoring. The proposed Austrian law would require businesses to closely monitor their suppliers, including conducting regular assessments of working conditions and compliance with environmental standards. If violations within the supply chains are indefined, companies would be obliged to take corrective measures to eliminate these irregularities and prevent future occurrences. So what does this mean for companies? Business operating in Austria will need to prepare for increased monitoring of their suppliers and ensure full supply chain transparency. Although the law has not been yet enacted, companies should proactively assess their current practices to align with the expected requirements. Non-compliance, once the law is in force, could result in penalties, and companies may be required to prove documentation proving that their suppliers meet ethical and environmental responsibilities at all levels. So Austria has set an ambition goal to become climate neutral by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of European Union's target. To achieve this objective, the country will need to implement a series of measures that will impact all businesses operate in Austria. These measures offer significant opportunities for businesses that proactively invest in sustainability, including access to new markets, reduced operational costs, and competitive advantages. Key measures include investments in renewable energy. Austria will encourage companies to invest in renewable energy sources, such as solar and wind power. Businesses that invest in green energy will benefit from the tax benefits and financial support. Then support for sustainable businesses. The National Sustainability Strategy aims to transition to a circular economy and more sustainable production processes. Companies that adopt sustainable practices will have access to financial benefits to help them transition to greener business models. and stricter environmental standards for industry and transport. So to achieve climate neutrality, Austria will introduce stricter environmental regulations for the industrial and transport sectors. Companies that consume large amount of energy or produce high CO2 emissions will face higher taxes or restrictions on resource consumption. So what does this mean for businesses? Companies operating in Austria will need to comply with these new standards and adjust their operations accordingly. This means that they will have to invest in environmental solutions, reduce emissions, and improve energy efficiency if they want to remain competitive and meet regulatory requirements. In short, Austrian companies that align quickly and effectively with these national ESG standards will be better positioned for long-term growth, track sustainable investments, and avoid significant regulatory risks. So far, we've focused mainly on regulations and legal requirements related to ESG, but compliance isn't just only aspect that matters. Companies also follow global standards and guidelines to ensure consistency and transparency in their reporting. So these standards are not only legally binding, they play a crucial role in helping companies align with best practices on a global scale. This makes it easier to compare data, build trust with stakeholders, and demonstrate a commitment to sustainability. There are several frameworks commonly used around the world, each offering a different perspective on how to report on ESG activities. In the next few slides, we'll take a closer look to some of the most widely recognized standards and how they shape the corporate sustainability reporting. So first one is Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. It is the most widely recognized international standard for sustainability reporting. It is used by thousands of companies worldwide to transparently report on their environmental, social, and governance practices. The framework ensures a consistent approach to reporting on corporate impacts and promotes global comparability. So over 10,000 organizations in the GRI standard demonstrating its broad acceptance. For instance, Coca-Cola, Adidas, and Siemens constantly use Global Reporting Initiative to transparently disclose their sustainability practices, which enhances their global credibility. So how does GRI support companies? It enables companies to report in a way that ensures comparability and transparency in their sustainability practices. The standard covers various ESG aspects, including carbon footprint, social impact, ethical concerns, and governance practices. It provides common reporting guidelines for companies worldwide, making sustainability disclosures more reliable and comparable. And let's move on to another standard, and this is Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB. This standard develops industry-specific ESG reporting standards to help companies address material ESG risks to their sectors. Unlike GRI, companies provide broad guidelines. SASB focuses on sector-specific ESG factors, making disclosures more precise and relevant. So how does SASB help companies? It helps business identify ESG risks and challenges specific to their industries, improving the relevance of sustainability reports. For example, the energy sector, SASB, includes specific criteria for reporting on climate risks, while in consumer goods, it focuses on waste management and sustainable supply chains. The Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, TCFD, a standard is a critical framework for reporting on climate-related risks and their financial impact on businesses. It is particularly important for financial institutions such as banks and insurance companies, as well as businesses with a significant environmental footprint. This standard helps companies disclose how climate change and associated financial risks affect their operational and describes strategies for managing these risks and opportunities. And the reporting framework includes key details on climate risk management, business impacts, and investment strategies. While some of these standards remain voluntary, investors and regulators are increasingly demanding adherence to them. So ESG compliance is not longer just a recommendation. It has become a key factor for corporate success and competitiveness. Companies that fail to align with these standards may face challenges in accessing capital, attracting investors, and meeting stakeholders' expectations. Compliance with global ESG standards is now a crucial factor influencing corporate credibility and long-term investment potential. But so companies that embrace these standards demonstrate their commitment to sustainability, accountability, and transparency. So in conclusion, ESG regulations are evolving rapidly and becoming more complex. And companies looking to succeed in this new environment must adapt quickly and take the necessary steps to ensure compliance. To fully leverage ESG benefits, businesses should stay informed about new regulations and integrate ESG considerations into their business strategies. Then develop a ESG reporting strategy that ensures transparency and compliance with relevant standards and regulations, and ensure accurate reporting and alignment with standards to enhance credibility and attract investment. To this overview of key global ESG reporting standards highlights their growing significance and corporate sustainability. So, to sum it up, compliance with these global standards not only helps companies meet regulatory demands, but also significantly boosts their reputation, strengthens investor confidence, and ensures long-term competitiveness. So in the next section, we will explore how companies implement ESG reporting in practice and examine how the key components of successful strategy or sustainability strategy. So, like I said, we have explored the legal and regulatory frameworks for ESG. And let's now examine the specific practices companies use in ESG reporting. Let's look at how companies can consistently and effectively implement ESG reporting, what practices are necessary for compliance with various standards, and how these practices can help businesses leverage ESG as a competitive advantage. So, reporting on ESG activities is not only formality, it's a legal obligation. We said this a few times today, and it is crucial part of business operations, like enables companies to build trust with stakeholders, including investors, consumers, employees, and regulators. So successful ESG reporting increases the transparency, comparability, and reliability of corporate data, allowing businesses to secure a competitive edge in the market. Companies that clearly communicate their sustainability goals, achievements, and challenges are better prepared for future regulatory changes and can more rapidly earn the trust of investors and consumers. So, in other words, ESG reporting is not just about regulatory compliance, it is also an opportunity to improve companies' market position and enhance its long-term value. So let's look at what successful ESG reporting includes. Effective ESG reporting involves several key practices that ensures companies not only meet regulatory obligations, but also create sustainable value. This includes identifying key ESG indicators. Companies must select and monitor metrics relevant to their industry. This ensures they report on significant factors and challenges that pertain specifically to their sector. Then establish a robust data collection system. ESG data must be accurate, reliable, and verifiable. So this requires establishing efficient system for collecting and processing data, either by integrating ESG indicators into existing corporate information system or through internal audit processes. But in the reality is that it's connected to budget, which, let's face it, we don't have. And then we have a bunch of Excel sheets that we have to work with. But nevertheless, ESG data must be accurate, reliable, and verifiable, even if we have just Excel. Then ensuring regulatory compliance. Companies must align their ESG reporting with legislative requirements, such as the CRSD and other EU directives, which we mentioned before, and global standards if necessary, like GRI, SASB, and TCFD. And this includes aligning the reporting frameworks with regulatory guidelines and reporting progress towards specific sustainability objectives. So, external review and verification of ESG data, a very important topic. ESG data undergo independent audits to ensure credibility and prevent greenwashing. Third-party verification significantly enhance the reliability and transparency of corporate reports, meeting stakeholders' expectations and building investors' confidence. And by adopting these practices, companies not only align their operations with regulatory requirements, but also strengthen credibility, reduce the risk of penalties, and enhance their reputation with investors and stakeholders. So let's look at the key steps for companies preparing for ESG reporting. So to successfully implement ESG reporting, companies require a clear strategy involving several key steps to ensure that their data is accurate, transparent, and compliant with regulatory requirements. So ESG reporting is not just a matter of fulfilling legal obligations, as we learned by now. It is also crucial of demonstrating a company's commitment to sustainable and responsible business practices. So first is defining key ESG indicators. The first step in preparing for ESG reporting is to define the key indicators the company will track to measure and report on its sustainability practices. I've said this before, because clear ESG indicators allow companies to demonstrate how they contribute to sustainable development and to transparently communicate their objectives and progress. But how to identify key ESG indicators? So, businesses in industrial sectors typically focus on indicators related to carbon dioxide, so CO2 emissions, energy consumption, waste management, and sustainable production practices. For example, the steel industry may focus on CO2 emission reduction, while automotive manufacturers might track energy efficiency at their facilities. Then financial institutions, companies operating in banking, insurance, and investment sectors prioritize reporting on sustainable investments, the environmental and social impacts of their investments, and alignment with the sustainability objectives of the EU and global ESG guidelines. So what do companies gain from defining indicators? First is clear tracking of progress towards defined ESG goals. Then improved transparency and trust with investors and stakeholders, and easier comparison and benchmarking within their industry. So establishing a system for ESG data collection. Companies cannot effectively report on ESG performance without reliable systems for data collection, processing, and analyzing. Like we said multiple times, the key issue is that data must be accurate, verifiable, and aligned with both regulatory requirements and industry standards. So how do companies collect ESG data? From my perspective and experience, hard. It's not an easy job to do. It's very hard. And I believe that everybody facing this problem can say the same, but it is a struggle that we are all in this process and are improving bit by bit. One of the possible one of the possible solution is integrating into ERP systems, so enterprise resource planning platform. Many companies integrate ESG metrics into this platform, which is great because this allowed efficient collection and processing of data at various organizational levels. Then internal reporting process. Companies establish regular internal reporting procedures to ensure data is consistently collected and available for analysis and continuous improvement. And auditing, external auditing to guarantee accuracy and reliability. ESG data should be independently verified by external auditors. This is a critical component of reporting under standards such as GRI or CSRD, which require a high level of transparency. But I recommend for you to have internal audit before it, just to be sure and to be clear that everything is really in order with this data. So what does this mean for businesses? Ensuring high quality, accurate data reduces the risk of errors that could lead to accusations of greenwashing or regulatory penalties. Reliable ESG data enhances credibility among investors, regulators, and other stakeholders. So we have discussed this extensively before, but it is crucial to emphasize once again what external verification of ESG data is and why it's not just that it's important, but it is becoming mandatory in many cases. So with rapidly increasing regulatory requirements and growing stakeholders' pressure, companies are now often required to engage independent auditors or assurance providers to verify their sustainability reports. So why is external verification important? It ensures that ESG reports contain accurate and verifiable information. Independent verification significantly enhances credibility with investors, regulators, and other stakeholders. and it helps companies to avoid accusations of greenwashing, where the accuracy of data might be called into question. So compliance with mandatory regulations such as CSRD in the European Union, which requires limited accuracy on sustainability reporting. How do companies implement verification? Typically, companies engage external auditors or advisory firms to regularly review ESG data and ensure alignment with regulatory and industry standards, including different frameworks. Failure to implement robust external verification can result in non-compliance with mandatory requirements, significant reputational risk, and loss of stakeholders' confidence. So therefore, it is essential that companies proactively establish reliable verification process to meet both legal obligations and market expectation. So despite growing attention on ESG reporting, there are still common mistakes that can undermine the credibility of companies' disclosures. These errors can negatively impact stakeholders' confidence, including investors, consumers, and regulators. So the first one is incomplete data. Companies without an effective system for collecting and processing data, ESG data, often encounter challenges in providing complete and accurate information. For example, a manufacturing company that does not monitor CO2 emissions across all production levels may only report emissions from its main facilities while overlooking emissions for suppliers or logistical operations. This leads to incomplete data and fails to provide a comprehensive picture of the company's environmental impact. So what does this mean for company? Incomplete data can lead to poor decision-making and reduce stakeholders' trust as investors, regulators, and consumers expect accurate and comprehensive information. Gaps in data mean the company might not fully understand its environmental and social impact, potentially causing delays in achieving sustainability goals. And insufficient data completeness can result in ineffective strategies for meeting sustainability targets. The next one is greenwashing. Companies sometimes mispresent their sustainability efforts as more effective or extensive as they actually are, demanding their credibility. So, example, a company might claim that it uses 100% sustainable materials in production, while in reality, only a small fraction of products contain recycled materials, with the rest made from non-sustainable plastic. A misleading representation of sustainability practices are known as greenwashing. So what does this mean for the company? The first one is customer trust. So consumers and investors are increasingly violent regarding the authenticity of companies' sustainability commitments, and greenwashing quickly erodes stakeholders' trust. The next one is legal consequences. Greenwashing may lead to legal repercussions. For example, companies in US accused of greenwashing have faced penalties for misleading sustainability claims. And greenwashing also indicates that the company is failing to achieve genuine sustainability goals, increasing pressure from regulators, investors, and consumers for greater transparency. The next one is lack of internal capacity. Many companies lack from expertise or resources required for effective ESG reporting, increasing the likelihood of errors. And this can result in misinterpretation of data and inaccurate reporting, ultimately reducing stakeholder confidence. For example, a company without trained personnel to collect and analyze data, ESG data, may struggle to prepare reports compliant with standards like CSRD or GRI, and this can lead to mistakes in reporting or even incorrect interpretation of data. What does this mean for the company? The first one is reduced transparency and credibility. The lack of internal ESG capacity may cause reporting errors, leading to poor transparency and diminished credibility of ESG disclosures. Then non-compliance with regulatory requirements. Companies that fail to invest in training their staff in ESG management risk improperly implementing ESG strategies, which can have long-term negative effects, including loss of reputation and competitiveness. And of course, delay achievement of sustainability goals. Poorly coordinated and unprofessional ESG reporting can lead to significant delays in meeting critical sustainability objectives. So companies need robust strategies to effectively avoid common mistakes in ESG reporting, and this includes establish efficient system for collecting, processing, and analyzing ESG data across all business operations. Reliable ESG reporting not only minimizes errors and regulatory risks, but also significantly enhances the company's credibility, reputation, and attractiveness to investors. So how can companies avoid these common mistakes? First is establish integrated data collection system if possible. So companies must or should implement integrated system to collect ESG data consistently and accurately across the entire organization. All relevant departments such as production, supply chains, finance, and logistics should be connected through a unified reporting system, ensuring comprehensive and complete ESG data reporting. For example, if company measures its CO2 emissions, this should be done not only at its own production sites, but through its entire supply chains, as emissions across the supply chain significantly impact the company's overall environmental footprint. Why is this important? Integrated data systems ensure transparency and completeness of ESG data, and companies without such integrated system risk incomplete reporting and reduce credibility among investors and stakeholders. The next one is ensure employee training and capacity building. To improve ESG reporting accuracy, companies should invest in educating their employees. Lack of ESG expertise within the company can result in incorrect or incomplete reporting, as we said. So, for example, companies can organize internal workshops where employees learn how to collect data on energy efficiency, waste management, or social impacts, thereby ensuring better compliance with standards such as CSRD or GRI. Why does this matter? Investing in staff training significantly reduces the risk of inaccurate or incomplete ESG reporting. And also, trained employees can efficiently adapt to regulatory changes and continuously improve sustainability practices, which is very important. So this factor of awareness in ESG processes within the company is basically crucial. So regular compliance checks is the next step. Companies should regularly audit their ESG practices to ensure continuous compliance with regulatory requirements. External and internal audits play a crucial role in maintaining credible ESG reporting. Example, companies conduct regular internal ESG audits, and then they can quickly identify potential errors or non-compliance, such as inaccuracies or in reported CO2 emissions, or the use of non-sustainable materials, engaging external auditors further validates data and processes, but also in many cases, external audit is mandatory. So why does this matter? Regular compliance checks prevent greenwashing risks, and consistent audits demonstrate responsibility to regulators, investors, and other stakeholders. And the last one, transparency and honesty in reporting. Companies should prioritize transparency, providing truthful reporting on ESG achievements as they openly discussing challenges and areas for improvement. A company claiming to use sustainable materials, but also openly reporting shortcomings such as higher than desired carbon emissions due to production errors will be viewed as more credible and trustworthy. So why does transparency matter? Honest reporting builds consumers and investment trust, and it reduces the risk of greenwashing accusations, which can severely damage a company's reputation. So, conclusion, by implementing integrated data collection systems, investing in employee training, conducting regular compliance audits, internal and external, and ensuring transparent reporting, companies can avoid common ESG reporting mistakes. So adhering to these best practices help maintain regulatory compliance, enhance stakeholder trust, and ultimately provide significant competitive advantage, long-term stability, and financial benefits. So leading companies in ESG reporting don't just meet regulatory requirements, that is basically a minimum. They actively incorporate sustainability into their core strategy. This proactive approach not only mitigates risks, but also enhances long-term value and competitiveness. And these companies set the standard for how to effectively align business practices with ESG goals, demonstrating that strong sustainability performance is not just a compliance task, but a driver of business success. So they have recognized that going beyond compliance strengthens their market position, builds stakeholder trust, and increases investment attractiveness. So let's take a look at how some companies are leading the way in ESG practices, while also navigating the challenges typical for their industries. So first one is Nestlé. Nestlé is one of the world's largest food companies, significantly influencing global markets and supply chains. Due to its scale, Nestlé has substantial responsibilities towards sustainability, especially with its supply chains. So highlights of ESG practices for Nestlé are environmental sustainability, so responsible resourcing. Nestlé has long led efforts in responsible sourcing, notably focusing on cocoa and palm oil, two commodities with significant environmental impact. The company has committed to sourcing these materials sustainably, minimizing deforestation, and supporting sustainable farming practices. Certification process ensure that these materials are responsibly obtained and environmental friendly. And the second one is social responsibility. Beyond environmental initiatives, Nestlé actively addresses social aspect of its business. It enforces strict guidelines, ensuring safe working conditions, fair wages, and the prevention of child labor across its supply chains. So these actions demonstrate Nestlé's commitment to human rights, standards, fair wages, and improved working conditions across all suppliers. So what can we learn from Nestlé? Nestlé exemplifies how responsible supply chain management and environmental initiatives build trust among customers and investors. Their commitment to sustainability practices set a positive example for the global food industry and demonstrates how large corporations can integrate ESG into their core business strategies to drive both responsibly and profitability. So the next one is Siemens. Siemens is an excellent example of integrating ESG into technological innovation and strategic planning. By prioritizing sustainability, Siemens ensures responsible growth while significantly reducing its environmental footprint. Highlights of Siemens ESG practices are digitalization and advanced technology. Siemens invests heavily in digitalization and innovative technology to minor and reduce environmental impacts. This includes optimizing production process, reducing energy consumption, and minimizing waste, therefore significantly improving overall efficiency. The next one is commitment to energy efficiency and sustainability. The company focuses on improving energy efficiency and in its operations and promotes energy efficient solutions to clients across industries such as manufacturing, transportation, and infrastructure, driving sustainability through the global economy. So lessons from Siemens. Siemens demonstrates how technology and innovations are central to effective ESG management. The company approaches highlights how technological inventions and sustainable solutions can significantly reduce environmental impacts, enhance reputation, and strengthen long-term competitiveness. So let's take a look at IKEA, my favorite. So IKEA is recognized for prioritizing sustainability and integrating ESG principles deeply into its business strategy. The company continually strives to minimize its environmental footprint and transitions toward a sustainable business model. So key ESG practices are circular economy initiatives. IKEA has embraced a circular economy by encouraging customers to return used furniture, which is then repaired, recycled, or resold. Sustainable material sourcing by 2030. IKEA aims to use only renewable or recycled materials in its products by 2030. This ambitious goal will replace traditional resources like fossil fuels and plastics with sustainable alternatives, greatly reducing the environmental footprint of its manufacturing processes. So IKEA also demonstrates how embedding sustainability into business model can effectively reduce environmental impacts while at the same time attracting eco-conscious consumers. Their circular economy strategy positions the company as sustainability leader within retail and furniture sectors, attracting consumers who value sustainable business practices. Let's take a look a bit to Unilever. This is a consumer goods sector. Unilever successfully integrates ESG into its business strategy and sustainability reporting, significantly enhancing its reputation and performance. The company's ESG initiatives include responsible production, sustainable supply chains, and positive social impacts. So key ESG highlights. Unilever employs global reporting initiative standards, ensuring transparent and credible ESG reporting. These comprehensive disclosures cover all key aspects of environmental and social impact, increasing transparency for stakeholders. Then carbon footprint reduction and sustainable agriculture. Unilever prioritizes reducing its carbon footprint across operations and supply chains. Sustainable agriculture and reduce emissions are core components of its strategy and positive social impact. Unilever invests in improving living conditions and fair working practices within its supply chains, particularly in developing countries. So Unilever demonstrates how business can successfully integrate ESG into their growth strategies, achieving compliance and creating long-term competitive advantages. So their proactive ESG strategy enhances stakeholder trust, investment attractiveness, and overall market credibility. Let's take a look on financial sector. BNP Paribas, one of the world's largest banks headquartered in Paris, France, set an excellent example in ESG integration within the financial industry by redirecting investments towards sustainable projects. Key ESG highlights. First, executing coal project financing. So BNP Paribas was the first major European bank to end financing for coal-related projects. This step significantly contributes to carbon emission reduction goals. The next one is strict ESG compliance requirement. BNP Paribas requires its clients to adhere to rigorous ESG standards, closely monitoring their environmental, social, and governance impact, and advanced ESG-focused investment funds. The bank manages one of Europe's most advanced ESG investment funds, allowing investors to directly support sustainable projects like renewable energy and social responsibility initiatives. So BNP Paribas amplifies the financial sector's role in sustainability by prioritizing ESG criteria in lending and investment decisions. This proactive stance demonstrates how financial institutions can effectively drive sustainable development while at the same time enhancing their competitive advantage. So what can businesses learn from these examples? The discussed examples illustrates how effective ESG integration creates more than just compliance. It builds competitive advantage, improves stakeholders' trust, and attracts sustainable investments. So key benefits for companies adopting robust ESG strategies include increased trust from stakeholders, such as customers, investors, and employees, improved corporate reputation and credibility, and enhanced attractiveness to investors seeking responsible investment and investment opportunities. In conclusion, ESG reporting is more than just meeting regulatory demands. It can significantly enhance a company's competitive position, increase stakeholder trust, and attract investment. So companies embracing these strategies early will enjoy lasting advantages, becoming leaders in sustainable and responsible business practices. So let's take a quick look at benefits and subsidies for ESG in Austria. Companies investing in sustainable projects can access various national and European subsidies, providing financial support to enhance their sustainability practices. Austria offers numerous benefits to encourage businesses to transition toward greener technologies and improve their energy efficiency. The first one is tax relief. Companies investing in sustainable projects such as solar power plants, energy efficient systems, or sustainable construction are eligible for reduced tax rates. This means businesses can significantly lower their tax burden by investing in projects with a positive environmental impact. The second one is funding for energy efficiency and renewable energy. The Austrian government actively promotes the shift towards renewable energy and increased energy efficiency. Companies investing in renewable energy sources, electric mobility, solar energy, or project aimed at reducing CO2 emissions can receive grants and subsidies. And this also includes investment in energy efficient buildings or smart energy management system. Then support for digitalization and sustainable innovation, businesses investing in ESG analytics, automation, and transparent reporting can access specific funds for digitalization and sustainability innovations. These benefits support companies developing advanced technologies for improved ESG monitoring and reporting. So ESG reporting is an opportunity for new financing. ESG reporting isn't just a regulatory requirement, it provides companies with opportunities to access additional financing resources. More and more businesses recognize ESG reporting as critical for their long-term success and as means of gaining financial resources to enhance their sustainability performance. So to summarize, companies in Austria that proactively implement ESG practices can benefit significantly from these financial advantages, making sustainability not only a requirement, but also a strategic financial opportunity. So, we have 15 more minutes. I hope that you are all with me. I see some familiar faces, but okay, I'll continue. Yeah. Hi, Tanya. So let's summarize the key challenges companies face when implementing ESG reporting. Below, we outline the most significant challenges in ESG reporting and how companies can address them. So, just quickly, regulatory complexity. As has been emphasized several times today, companies must navigate an increasing number of regulations, such as CSRD, the EU taxonomy, and the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. Each of these frameworks imposes specific obligations and guidelines that companies must follow when reporting on their sustainability practices. The next one is lack of high quality ESG data. Like I said, it's really a struggle, but collecting and analyzing ESG data is essential for successful reporting. But unfortunately, many companies lack the necessary infrastructure for reliable data collection. Then greenwashing, the risk of misleading ESG claims. This can severely damage corporate reputation, especially as stakeholders increasingly examine ESG claims. Regulators and NGOs are becoming stricter in verifying ESG reports, which increases the risk of legal penalties and financial consequences. So greenwashing not only harms a company's reputation, but also erodes trust among investors, consumers, and regulators. And the last one is integrating ESG into business strategy. Only businesses that fully embed ESG into their core business models will remain competitive and resilient in an evolving sustainability landscape. So, how can companies overcome these challenges? First one is early adaptation. Proactively adopting an ESG strategy allows businesses to stay ahead of regulatory changes and gain a competitive advantage. Then, automating ESG data collection, making use of artificial intelligence, blockchain, advanced digital tools improves data accuracy, transparency, and compliance. And then embedding ESG into corporate strategy, ESG must be part of executive decision-making and corporate culture. Leadership should actively drive sustainability innovations and align ESG initiatives with long-term business growth. So key takeaways, to effectively address ESG reporting challenges, companies should continuously monitor and adapt to evolving ESG regulations, establish robust data collection and validation processes, avoid greenwashing by ensuring transparency and credibility in ESG disclosures, and fully integrate ESG into their business model rather than just treating it as compliance, let's say, basically exercise, ticking one box. By implementing these measures, companies not only comply with regulations, but also enhance their credibility, stakeholder trust, and access to capital and investment opportunities. So after reviewing all the key elements of ESG reporting and current corporate practices, let's take a look at what the future holds. So ESG reporting is rapidly evolving. Basically, that's why we're here today, not only as a regulatory obligation, but as a strategic decision that influences long-term business success. Several key trends will shape the future of ESG reporting and corporate sustainability. The first one definitely is digitalization and artificial intelligence, who will play a key role in ESG monitoring. More companies are adopting advanced analytics, such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, to collect and process data. And it is great because these technologies enable better tracking of sustainability goals, more accurate reporting, and business process optimization. Blockchain technology will also be essential for ensuring greater transparency and reliability of ESG reports, as it provides accurate, verifiable, and permanent data. And this will help companies to maintain high levels of stakeholder trust. So ESG data will play a bigger role in access to financing. Investors and financial institutions will continue to increase pressure on companies to meet high ESG standards. Companies with low ESG ratings will find it harder to secure financing as investors prioritize businesses demonstrating long-term sustainability and responsible management. So companies that actively adopt ESG practices will have a competitive edge in securing capital. A strong ESG compliance will become a crucial factor in investment decisions. So stricter ESG regulations and increased transparency requirements are being implemented across the European Union and other regions. And as a result, companies are now required to provide more detailed and verifiable ESG disclosure to facilitate better monitoring of their progress and impact. And companies failing to comply with new regulations will risk sanctions, loss of trust, restricted access to capital, because ESG data will need to become standardized, comparable, and precise to enable effective sustainability assessments. So companies that adapt their ESG strategies in time will gain a competitive advantage. So proactively embracing ESG strategies will help companies not only to comply with current regulations, but also capitalize on long-term opportunities linked to sustainable development. And early adaptation will lead to stronger stakeholder trust, easier access to financing, and increased resilience to economic and environmental challenges. So the future ESG trends across industries. Based on current trends and expected changes, various industries will experience the distinct ESG developments. Let's just take a quick look on the different industries, what the impact will be. So energy sector, the European Union will impose even stricter regulations to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. Coal-fired power plants will be phased out by 2030 to 2040. Financial sector, investment funds and banks will intensify pressure on companies to meet ESG criteria. ESG ratings will directly impact companies' ability to secure capital. Then technology industry, the demand for ethical artificial intelligence development will continue to rise. Companies will face increasing accountability for environmental footprint of data centers and the energy consumption of digital services. Retail industry, the circular economy will become the norm, with more companies offering products reuse and recycling programs. Reducing packaging waste and using renewable materials will become top priorities for retailers. And automotive industry, the shift to electric vehicles will accelerate by 2035. The EU will ban the sale of new cars with internal burning engines, and alternative fuels such as hydrogen and synthetic fuels will gain traction as available solutions. So let's wrap the essence of everything discussed. Those who adapt will have a long-term competitive advantage. ESG is no longer just a reporting obligation, it is a key driver of corporate success. Companies that integrate sustainable practices into their strategies will not only comply with regulations, but also position themselves more effectively to tackle future challenges and seize the new opportunities as in a rapidly evolving business landscape. So as we conclude our discussion on ESG, we've covered a great deal today, from best practices to potential risk, offering valuable insights into how companies can navigate the complex landscape of sustainability. And the key question remains, how can companies successfully integrate sustainable practices into their daily operations? For a company to be truly sustainable, ESG practices should not be seen as an add-on, but as an integral part of business model. And this is crucial information from this today's session. So the transition requires a clear strategy, commitment, and alignment with both internal goals and external expectations. So to conclude, let's just outline the crucial steps companies should follow to make sustainability an integral part of their core strategy. So, where should businesses start? First, set clear ESG goals and indicators. The first step is defining the key ESG indicators that are relevant to companies' industry and operations. We talked about this, whether it's reducing CO2 emissions, improving energy efficiency, or increasing workforce diversity. The next one is integrate ESG into strategic planning and business processes. So ESG should not be treated as separate initiative or some sort of a checklist. It needs to be embedded into company's long-term strategy, and leadership must take responsibility for ESG goals and incorporate them into key business decisions to ensure long-term success. Then leverage technology for ESG data collection and analysis. Technology plays a crucial role in ESG implementation, and automated systems for collecting and processing ESG data help minimize errors and increase transparency, but it is budget related. So artificial intelligence and big data analytics can also assist in risk predictions and in identifying sustainable solutions. Engage stakeholders and maintain transparent communication, very important, transparent communication. ESG success depends on collaboration. So companies should actively involve employees, investors, suppliers, and also local communities in their ESG strategies. Regular and transparent reporting builds trust and reduces the risk of greenwashing, strengthening the company's reputation. And the last one, identifying funding opportunities of sustainable investments. So implementing ESG strategies requires financial resources. Businesses must evaluate how they will fund their sustainability initiatives, whether through internal budgets, government grants, green bonds, or other financial instruments. So, for conclusion, taking action today for sustainable tomorrow. The time to act on ESG is now. So sustainability is no longer optional. It is essential for long-term success. Companies that take proactive steps today will be better positioned in the future of challenges and opportunities. ESG is no longer just about the compliance, we said. It is a chance to build resilience, driving for innovations, and gain a competitive edge. So embedding ESG into their core strategy, ensuring transparency and securing the right financial resources, businesses can turn sustainability into a long-term advantage. So with that, we conclude our discussion on ESG reporting and corporate sustainability.